This is my story about a haunted doll named Claire. She's been featured in the book Haunted Objects: Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelves, on a couple of paranormal podcasts, and the TV show Haunted Towns that aired on Destination America back in 2017. You can still catch reruns of the show on Travel Channel every now and then. She was in the season finale, featuring McDonough, Georgia. Here's my story. As an 8-year-old child, I was given an old porcelain doll by a very dear family friend, Miss Marion. She was all the time coming across things and giving them to me. This doll was the last thing she gave me. I was never really into dolls at all growing up, but I took the doll and placed her in my room in a small, child-sized rocking chair. The chair sat next to my closet and dresser, right beside my nightlight. The doll was very pretty. She was dressed in a peach and cream colored dress with an apron and petticoats. She had little black Mary Jane shoes that, when removed, showed her delicately painted toenails. Her body was soft. Only her head, forearms, hands, and legs from the knee down were porcelain. Her lips were pink, and her dark brown hair hung in slightly frizzed and now loose curls. Her eyes were brown, her cheeks were a rosy peach color, all like mine. Miss Marion made a point of saying that the doll reminded her of me, which is why she gave her to me. From the moment that that doll, which I named Claire, came into my house, things began to happen. I was always uneasy with Claire. I never wanted to touch her, and when I played in my room, it was as if she watched me. It wasn't anything to panic about, but I do remember feeling like if I did something wrong, she might actually tell on me. How ridiculous does that sound? My first real occurrence that I remember was when I was reading in my room, ghost stories actually, when a musical carousel horse that sat on my dresser began to play. Not just a couple of notes like old mechanical music boxes will do from time to time, but like somebody just wound it up fully. I sat, stunned, and stared at the little horse as it moved up and down in time with the music. Then it just stopped. It didn't wind down, it just stopped. I was a pretty brave kid. I didn't run, and I didn't tell my mom. I used to see a shadow man in the hallway or in my parents' bedroom door all growing up. And if she didn't believe me about that, she wouldn't believe me about something as mundane as a music box playing on its own. So I just let it go. The next thing that happened was the voice. For several nights, and on into these years, I was awoken by what sounded like a woman, inches from my face, shouting my name. "Jill, wake up!" I would jump up and sit up to find my room empty. Those happenings died down after a few months. She then started to plague my little brother with the same thing, and now that he and I are grown and gone, she's moved on to my dad. The little things started to get to me. I'd put something in a certain place, only to find it later on the floor or on my dresser, right next to Claire. All of my missing items eventually turned up around her. Once, a ring ended up in the pocket of her apron. Books would fall off my shelves, and a perfume smell would sometimes fill my room. The doll itself didn't smell at all, but the air around her would. My catalyst to finally getting Claire out of my room was the night I woke up after hearing thumping around in my closet. I opened my eyes, sat up in bed, and of course my eyes were drawn to the nightlight, where Claire sat. I realized that it wasn't coming from in the closet, but near it. As I watched, the source of the thumping became clear. The rocking chair that Claire occupied was rocking on its own. I had thick shag carpet, so there was no way this thing was just rocking by chance. If that wasn't enough, Claire's feet, which were both turned to the side facing opposite each other, slowly straightened themselves to both be pointing directly up. 20 years later, this part still freaks me out. Then she turned her head, which was quite impossible to do since it was attached, fixed to her cloth body. She looked toward me, and every music box in my room, 4 of them to be exact, started to play all at once. I was frozen with fear. I didn't feel endangered so much as I just felt scared of what was happening. I screamed for my mom and dad. The music stopped, but Claire maintained her gaze in my direction. And this is why I hate dolls. Even after that, I couldn't get rid of Claire totally. I ended up stuffing her in a box in the back of a storage closet. She's still there as far as I know. So is the woman who now screams my dad's name in the middle of the night. While I think she explains some of the oddities that happen in my parents' house, I don't think she's the tie to all of it, especially the Shadow Man. My friend Tim Weisberg is a paranormal radio and podcast host of the show Spooky South Coast, and also is an author. He asked me to lend him Claire once. He heard my story back in 2011. I obliged, and Claire went to stay with him for a few months. He wrote about his experiences with Claire while she stayed with him in the book Haunted Objects that I mentioned earlier. Temperature changes in the room that she stayed in, along with hearing voices, were 2 of his noted encounters. Claire also stayed briefly at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in 2012. The guys from the Haunted Towns show encountered some things in my parents' house while Claire was with them. When I was younger, between the ages of 7 to 10, I lived in a small house in Missouri. We lived in a small town. Nothing was abnormal about the house. I mean, there were the normal house settling noises which would cause me to have nightmares frequently, but nothing else. Until this incident, the only weird thing that had ever happened was our keys had gone missing. When you walked in the door, there was a giant metal wood stove that we would put our keys on. They went missing for weeks. We destroyed the house looking for them. And one day, they just reappeared, and nobody knew where they came from. Anyway, there was a doll back when I was younger called an Amazing Grace doll. She had holes in her ears so that she could hear you, and she would turn her head to wherever the noise had come from and would say, "Mama." Well, I loved this doll. I explicitly remember cleaning my room and propping Grace against the wall so she was sitting up. I lay down on my bed to read, and I heard the clicking she would make when her head turned. So I looked up and stared at her and got the normal "Mama" that she would say after she heard something. So I tossed my book down and picked her up to make sure that she was turned off. She was. So I flipped her switch and then flipped it back to off, thinking that this was just a normal malfunction. I sit her back in her spot and plop down to continue reading. It's completely quiet. As soon as I start reading, I hear the sound of her head moving again, and she says, "Mama." So I went and took out all of her batteries. I was over it at this point, so I just kind of tossed her on the ground and got back into my spot. That's when she started clicking quicker. Her head was moving back and forth, and she just kept saying, "Mama, Mama." I took off. I ran to get my dad, and he saw it and decided that we would burn the little doll. We did, and nothing happened again to my recollection, but my nightmares got worse. This was when I was still religious, so I would put all my stuffed animals around me in a circle to protect me. I had a turquoise dream catcher, and I would pray every night for the nightmares to go away. They never did, until we moved. They weren't every day, but definitely several times a week. Regardless, I was very glad to get out of that house and away from that doll. When I was about 8 or 9, my entire family went to a quinceañera. I guess we were good enough friends with the birthday girl that we received the quince doll. which is basically meant to look like the birthday girl. To give you an image of what it looked like, imagine a doll with a white dress and curly hair. We kept it in the living room, where I slept on the floor, which is another story. And my brothers and I always had some weird feeling about it, like it was watching us. I'd say around 3 to 4 months of it being in the living room is when I started to notice weird things happen in not only the living room, but also in both of my brothers' rooms. I'll start with my experiences first. Like I mentioned before, I used to sleep in the living room. I would lay down near my parents' door, and I would start to hear the strangest noises coming from near the TV, or near the small cabinet that we put the doll on display. From hearing things in the kitchen fall on the floor, to hearing a little girl laugh on the couch, a lot of weird things started to happen. I pretty much tried to ignore all of this with tears in my eyes, doing what kids do when they're scared. I covered myself with a blanket. But one experience will forever haunt me, and I still get chills thinking about it. I was crying one night for Lord knows what. My brother tells me it's because I was claiming I heard voices near my ear. My parents didn't believe me and told me that I was delusional. He invited me into his room to sleep, and I jumped at the opportunity. Just before entering his room, I went to the restroom. It's literally right next to my brother's room. While I was in there, I felt someone's hand right on my shoulder. I immediately turn around and get freaked out. I hurried up and got out of there, but that wasn't the worst thing. I entered his room and slept on his bed while he just played on the PS3. I slept from maybe around 20-ish minutes to 30 before waking up to him coming in the room with food. I kid you not, the moment he sat down, the closet door swung open with enough force to hit the wall. We looked at each other in disbelief about what we just saw. My dad burst in to ask what the hell was going on. We tried explaining it to him, but he just shook it off and told us to go back to sleep. He walked out of the room and my brother continued to play. We were trying our best not to talk about it, when we hear the toilet just flush on its own, along with the shower curtain moving. Mind you, nobody was in there. We would have known, since the door always creaks open and shut with a pretty distinct sound. That room, I'd like to say, is where most of the activity always happened. The guy that we let rent out that room always said he was scared of it, but because he needed a place to stay, he just dealt with it. That was my experience when I was younger. But now, let me tell you about my older brothers. I'll start with the youngest of my older brothers. We'll call him Dave. Dave slept in the room on the other side of the house, completely away from the doll, but with a massive window that had a hole within the curtains. He had things happen in the afternoon, like tools being thrown from one side of the room to the other, the TV falling, and unexplainable scratches on his chest. But the one thing that scared the heck out of me was that he had this dream. In the dream was the girl in the white dress. Let me clarify, not the doll, but a girl. This happened to both of my brothers. The dream started off normally, until he noticed the white-dressed girl at his school and went near her. She turned around and, as he remembers, she didn't have eyes. It was just black holes, and she had a sad expression on her face. He woke up to my parents trying to calm him down. I remember being right outside his room, peeking in. He was legit crying his eyes out, and I've never seen him act that way before. I have another older brother. We'll call him Mark. I believe that he had the worst of it since he slept not even 5 feet away from the doll. He also had a dream about the girl in the dress and the doll as well. But his dream wasn't scary, just anxiety-inducing, in my opinion. All he remembers is sitting at the dinner table. The doll was not too far away from the table. It was right in front of the table if I remember correctly. The girl with the white dress was sitting across from him, with the doll next to her. Apparently the doll was blinking, and the girl was emotionless, not blinking whatsoever. This is when he started to hear a clock tick. It ticked and ticked and ticked, until he suddenly woke up in a cold sweat. But the problem was, when he woke up, the doll wasn't in the cabinet. Instead, it was right in front of him. He screamed and threw it toward the closet, breaking the head of the thing. My mom came in and thought somebody had broke in. She saw the doll with the broken head on the floor. And the creepiest thing was that the doll was upright, with the head right behind it. While she was extremely angry, she was just glad that he was safe, and she threw the doll out. That was the end of it, really. A few more things did happen, but nothing as bad as what I just told you about. Needless to say, we're glad the doll is gone. This happened when I was in the 4th grade, during Christmas time, around 2014. I live in Salem, Oregon, which is relevant to the story. Downtown, there's this antique store called the Unicorn. We went there to get my older brother World War II stuff for Christmas, because he likes that kind of thing. It's a really big store for an antique shop, so like normal kids, my brother and I went off to explore. Around the front of the shop, past a couple of bookcases, was this kids section. It was mostly full, with old board games and those tin toys, like those red geese with blue hats. What I did find was this old doll with a sticker on its face, just all dirty and broken. It said, "Cursed Doll," on this piece of paper, with a warning sign at the bottom. I don't really remember what the warning sign said. Being 10 years old, I just looked at it and called bull, and then flicked the glass and told the doll that it needed Jesus. Later that night, I went to sleep and had a dream of a green face in a dark background that kept trying to eat me. I woke up all gross and sweaty, but I realized that the bathroom light was on. My room is connected to the bathroom, so it's not outside my room in the hallway like in most people's houses. So when I woke up, I could clearly see the light reflecting off my wall. I could hear the light switch being turned on and off, but the light was still on. Eventually the light turned off, but the switch kept on flicking. Then the banging on my wall happened, and it lasted for a good 2 minutes. It just kept getting louder and louder, and then all I remember is not being able to breathe and passing out. When I woke up the next morning, I asked my brother why he kept banging on my wall. He said that he was at a friend's house last night, so he couldn't have banged on the wall. That scared the crap out of me. I told my dad what happened, and he believes that I pissed off whatever possessed that doll or made it cursed. I don't really mess with that stuff anymore, but cool story, I guess. I was really young when this happened. I don't even think I'd started going to school yet. I don't remember much about that stage of my life, but I still think about this experience to this day. It was near Christmas, and there was a doll that my younger sister and I looked forward to playing with every year. It was an angel, where if you pressed a button, she would sing Silent Night. The thing is, though, once I was done playing with it, I had to return it downstairs. My parents eventually realized that we had forgotten to bring it down, so I was sent upstairs alone to retrieve it. As I went up to my room to get it, I heard the doll sing Silent Night. The doll had a history of going off on its own, so I thought nothing of it. I went up and opened the door. My room was completely dark at the time, but when the light from the hallway came on, it shined on the pitch-black figure of a little girl who was playing with the doll. The girl immediately turned her eyes on me, and I stared back at her, shocked. My vision blurred, and my ears were ringing, and the next thing I knew, I had to pick myself up from the ground. Nobody seemed to notice that I hadn't come back downstairs. Confused and unable to comprehend what had happened, I would just go downstairs with the doll, seeing as the girl had left. I returned the doll and carried on with my day because I had no idea what had happened. It wasn't until I looked back on it when I was older that I realized just how terrifying that was. Ever since I was 5 years old, I've had an extreme fear of dolls. I am terrified of them. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who are. But when I reached the age of about 16, my mother finally told me where my fear may have come from. It's from a personal experience. To this day, I can never fully answer whether I believe in the paranormal or not. But my personal experience with a doll given to me by an aunt who practiced black magic haunts me until this day. When my mom told me this tale, I had minor flashbacks of the feeling that I had with this specific doll. From the first day I was born, I never slept properly. Never did, never have, and probably never will. I didn't cry or anything when I was awake early. I would just quietly play with my hands and wait for my mom to come get me. I did this from when I was an infant until I was a toddler. Around age 5, we had an aunt from my biological father's side visit us. Now, keep in mind that I have nothing to do with my biological father, and this aunt may have wished my mother harm. Fijians from that generation are typically very superstitious, and many of them believe in black magic. The things I began to do made us believe that there was something very wrong with this porcelain doll that she had given me as a gift. My mom began to notice that I would spend a lot of time with the doll. My younger brother, who would have been around 1 to 2 years old at that time, spent a lot of time with my mom. I was a very jealous child when he was first born, so at first she wasn't too surprised that I spent my time away from them. One morning she came to my bedroom and was surprised that I wasn't there. Like I said before, no matter what time I was awake at, I never got up without her. We had a basement that my brother and I were strictly forbidden from opening and going into, because the stairs were spaced quite far apart, and, being small, we could easily have fallen through or down onto the concrete. She had a lock put up on the high door, just in case. Besides that, the basement was freaky as hell, and I never even wanted to go in there alone. Ever. This particular morning, along with noticing that I was not in my usual place waiting for her, she noticed that this freakish doll wasn't there either. Before she called out my name, she heard me sniveling downstairs. As she climbed the stairs down toward me, she saw that doll sitting on the couch. She heard my crying get louder. As she got closer, she saw that I was trying to open the basement door lock while crying. "Charissa, what the heck are you doing? Didn't I tell you to never go down there without me?" I started screaming and crying and ran to bury my face in her dress with relief. Such relief that she was there to stop me. I kept telling her, "Mommy, the doll made me. The doll made me," through my tears. I have no idea what this doll's name is anymore, but I apparently was saying the name of the doll instead of the doll. My mom, who is not a believer, was thoroughly creeped out, because she said that my tears and hysterical crying were not that of a child trying to find an excuse for getting caught doing something bad, but actual relief of being saved. She packed me up and we were off to my grandma's house, without the doll. We got rid of that doll stat. I know that this is a hard story to believe for anybody. I probably would have just played it off as me being a child and trying to blame the doll for getting caught. But I know that I never dared to get up without my mom, because I was scared to get up by myself, and I liked the attention of her coming to get me out of bed every morning. I also have very creepy memories of some things about that doll that I'm still too scared to even think about, let alone write down. So I know this is really weird, but I have always been obsessed with the idea of having a haunted item. So I went on eBay and I did a very thorough search of trusted sellers and stores where I might buy haunted items. I eventually settled on my doll Evelyn because the seller stated that the vessel was inhabited by the spirit of Evelyn, who died at age 17 and had hopes of going to college and being a teacher. I felt a connection to her there because I am currently a senior at university and I'm about to start working as an English teacher. I hope to read to Evelyn often and ask her advice for my lesson plans. I even fantasize about giving her a place in the classroom to sit so she can still achieve her dreams. Update. So the first day and night with Evelyn, and I only have a couple of out-of-the-ordinary things to report. First off, my cat won't stop rubbing against the doll or sniffing it. And secondly, I fell asleep last night with my TV on, watching South Park on Hulu, which means that my DVD player was also on. I woke up at 1 a.m. to both of those things being shut off. Now I know that there's probably a logical explanation for that, but honestly, I'm kind of hoping it's just her. Update night 2. Nothing happened last night that I know of, except that I woke up at 2 a.m. for no reason. But that's becoming typical for me anyway. Today, as I was getting ready for class, I turned on a paranormal story time on YouTube. Right after, my door that had been shut opened by itself about a quarter of the way. My cat and I both shot our heads to the door when that happened to look. And I know y'all will probably say I'm stupid for this, but I used the Ghost Radar app, and it said that there was an entity right in the direction of where my door is. I'll let you know if there are any further updates. I bought a little porcelain doll at the Salvation Army this past weekend. I used to collect them as a little girl, and it was cheap, so why not? I wanted something to scare the trick-or-treaters that came into work. Since I've had the doll, I've had a horrible time sleeping. My house feels strange, and when I'm up at night and alone, I feel uneasy. I'm sleeping with the covers over my head. Any small sound makes my heart flip, and I can't sleep very well. It reminds me of the terrible nights I had sleeping as a child and being afraid. Even during the day, when I'm alone and getting ready for work, I feel so off in the house. It's been the past few days since I've bought that doll and kept her in the house. Today I brought her into work, and I'm hoping that the strange feelings I have at home will subside. Maybe I'm just being jumpy since it's Halloween, but I'm 26 and I haven't had these feelings since I was a child. Has anybody else had a similar experience? About a week or so ago, I received an Elmo doll. I was on vacation, visiting a few relatives, and my 90-year-old great-aunt gave me this red Elmo plush. At first, everything was normal about it, nothing out of the ordinary. However, the activity began when I returned back home. I placed the doll on my bed and lied down to sleep for the night. During the night, I began to see shadows moving across my room, and a feeling that I was being watched. Of course, I at first thought I was just imagining things, so I brushed it off. The next night, however, things started to get weird. The number of shadows moving around my room increased, and I felt like there was something standing over me, watching me. I put two and two together and grabbed the doll. My stomach began to feel nauseous. A sense of anxiety filled me when I held the doll, and I felt like a negative energy was being transferred into my body. I immediately removed the doll from my room and placed it in a different area of the house. I told my parents, but they just joke about it and think I'm crazy. But I swear there's something wrong with this doll, and I have no idea how to go about investigating it. My uncle was such a sweet guy that for my 18th birthday, he gifted me with a creepy but adorable porcelain clown sitting on a swing. It had 2 red dots on the cheeks, a red nose, a frilly costume, and white gloves. It had a pointed hat and brown curly hair. What he didn't know was that I had an extreme fear of clowns, and I still do. I accepted it anyway, because it was such a sweet gift. I hung it up on my curtain rod, kind of proud that he had even thought of me at all, because it was rare that he gave me presents. The first week was fine, but after that, weird things began to happen. I started to grow creeped out by this doll to the point where I wouldn't even get dressed in my own room. There were a few times where it would swing on its own. I never opened my window, so I know that it wasn't the wind, and it wouldn't have been able to swing without some sort of force. Several times I would walk out of the room and come back in to find that the head had twisted to look outside my door. For a long time, I thought it was my family members playing a joke on me, because they knew that I didn't like clowns, so I just grinned and put up with it. I also locked my door from the inside with one of those bolt locks, just in case. I did this for a couple of months. One morning, it was taken too far, and it was the last straw for me. I woke up and hit something with my hand. I turned my head to come face to face with the clown doll. I looked at the curtain rod, but it definitely was not there. The only way it could have been brought down was if you lifted the rod and took the doll off by the swing ring. I know for a fact that my family didn't do it, because my bedroom door was still bolted shut. I had had enough, and I took the doll and threw it in the big bin, and then put it on the verge for the bin man to come that day. I told my uncle that I had accidentally broken it when I was putting it away to paint my room. I actually regret doing that. I kind of wish I had kept it. I was creeped out by stuff like that when I was younger, but now I love haunted stuff and creepy things. I kind of wish I had it hanging in my house.